Good morning again. Right before we came here, there was a church shooting in Fort Worth area. I've forgotten a lot of the details already, but I remember thinking, why do people do this? So I went actually tried to find the man on Facebook. He didn't exist. Didn't have any kind of record of him. I don't think he even had a Facebook page, but his sister did. And she had I guess if you would have printed it out, it would have been about 10 pages explaining why she thought her brother would do such a thing. And she was trying to justify it, trying to give him credit. But it's one of those things where she was a little bit honest because she started putting pieces together. And what she did was she looked back at his life and saw things that normally we would see and go, well, it doesn't really mean anything. But when you add them all up, it brings a man to a point where he can pull a gun out and start shooting people in a church. And those are kinds of things that we see people interviewed. Someone goes on a killing spree and they interview the neighbors and they say, well, we have no idea he was going to be that kind of person. We never saw it coming. And that's very well true, likely, because we keep ourselves hidden, right? I mean, how much do you actually know about your neighbors? And however, if you were in that man's house or in those people's houses and you look at them over a period of time, if you're a fly on the wall, you could pick out things here and there, especially if you think back. See, we can see things. Parents do this all the time with their children. We do that all the time with our past. Why am I where I am right now? Why am I the way that I am? And we find little hints and traces and things in the past that help us. And what we do is it's important that we look back on those, not so that we can have some kind of a victim mentality of, well, I can't help it. That's not the point at all. But so we can understand ourselves better and we can see where we came from. And if you see the path that you took to get to where you are, you can also see the path that you need to take to get out of where you are. And so this is what we're talking about, a series of lessons on witnesses of spiritual failure. And these are things that I'm not witnessing myself among any of us here, but they are warnings for us that we need to look at ourselves and take seriously the things that are spiritual matters. And this is one of those things. Laughter and enjoyment is a very interesting and a very acute witness to us. It doesn't mean that if we find things funny that we're wrong. When I was in preaching school, there was a gentleman there with me who was 6 months ahead of me, and he believed it was a sin to laugh. He believed that any jesting was coarse jesting. And he was such a serious man. I've never seen someone as serious as he was. Now, since then, he's lightened up a little bit. I've actually seen him smile. He's actually laughed now, so he's changed his mind about that. But he was very serious. He would get up and berate us in chapel because we had the audacity to laugh sometime during school to release tension. And that's not what I'm meaning to say here. When I talk about laughter and enjoyment, there's nothing wrong with laughing. There's nothing wrong with enjoying life. And sometimes we laugh at things that catch us off guard that we would never approve. So please don't understand me to say if you laugh at something, then some jokes and things like that have shock value that cause us, instead of running and hiding or slapping, we laugh instead. It could be a nervous reaction. So please don't read into this that I'm sitting in judgment on anyone. It's not meant to legislate what you watch on television, but it is to make you think. Because there are certain principles that are involved here that we must, as Christians, be honest with ourselves about. And so while I'm saying I'm not legislating, that doesn't mean that God is not looking at us and will require an answer of why we allowed certain things to happen or didn't happen in our lives. So we need to keep that in mind as we go through this. So this is as much to me as it is to you. It's all of us together. We are a family, and we're going for this. And, as I said before, when people fall away and they look back, they might find some things. And while laughing at something and enjoying something is not necessarily wrong, it does give us an indication, a clue of what we were thinking or what our mindset was when we were doing the laughing and things that we were enjoying. There are things that I used to do that I really enjoyed, and things that I used to laugh at that I would not laugh at now, and I would not enjoy now, because I'm a different person than I was then. We used to tell stories sitting around a house of, me and my brothers would tell stories about things that our coaches would do to us, and we would laugh. And I would laugh about the fact that I was so thirsty during workouts that I would suck the sweat out of my chin strap because I couldn't get any moisture in my mouth. And that was funny. And now looking back on it, I'm horrified that it happened, right? It's not funny at all. I didn't understand. But then it's just funny. This is what happens. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. We grow out of things, and we can learn from these things before bad things happen. And we also can look at other people and say, wow, look at how that turned out. So this is an important thing for us to consider. So what you reveal or what you enjoy reveals what you treasure. Now, this is a general principle, but it's true if you think about it. The things that I enjoy are the things that I enjoy, right? And these are things that I put joy in, that I treasure in some way. And that is a very important principle that this is based on. So the things that I enjoy are what I actually treasure. And we know that where our treasure is, that's where our heart will be also. So this is like I said, a very important concept. So there are three basic ideas, principles that we need to be aware of as we're thinking about this, the things that we enjoy and the things that we laugh at. First of all, we need to recognize that we are not immune. I remember one time Carla and I were first married. We didn't have any discretion about what we watched. It didn't matter to us. Now we had I shouldn't say it didn't matter. I mean, it did matter, but language was not a big deal. If we watched a movie, we wouldn't watch anything with nudity in it, but language didn't matter to us at all. And so I remember one time we rented a movie. We were at Carla's parents' house, and we watched a movie, and it was PG-13, and it was all for language, and the language was horrific. It was bad, and I didn't think anything of it. And her dad, about halfway through, he just stood up and walked out in a huff. And the next morning, he blasted us. I'll never forget that. He said, "You are not immune. What you put in your mind will come out. You're not anyone special. If you put garbage in, you're going to have garbage come out." We started thinking about that. And he was right. I was allowing things in my household that I would never say. I was allowing people to do things and say things I would never allow someone coming to my house. I had strict rules. If you came in my house, you're not going to dip, you're not going to cuss, you're not going to drink, all kinds of things. You're not going to do those things in my house. But if we see it on television, that's different, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33 says, that's not the case. We are not immune. Be not deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. The word morals there, you can see it maybe even as the word scruples. It's not necessarily meaning that if you allow someone in your house that is a drunkard, that you're going to go out and be a drunkard too. If you're around someone who smokes dope, that you're going to end up smoking dope. Now, it could happen, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean. I've heard people argue with this verse, saying, well, that's just not true because I'm around people all the time and I don't do what they do. Okay, good. That doesn't mean that you're immune from it, because what the word there is, the morals, the idea is standards is the idea. What happens is when we're around evil things, those evil things are not as bad to us after a while. They start to affect us. And while it may be the case that we don't pursue sin to the degree that they are, it doesn't mean that we're not going to pursue it or that we're not influenced. And there's one thing that I've learned about a foundation. If you erode a foundation, the whole thing is going to collapse, right? There are problem areas that may come up in a lot of places in a house because of one area of a foundation that's bad. So we can't derail or degrade our standards in one area and not have the effect of degrading standards in other areas as well. That will influence each other. So if we have that recognition that we are not special, we are not immune to sin, we're not immune to influence, we're going to start guarding our hearts a lot more. We don't want things to become more palatable. So we need to be careful of the movies that we watch. We need to ask questions about the games that we allow our children to play. We need to be careful of the music that we listen to. And this is a very big one to me. I love music. I'm a very music person. And if we're not careful, see, we'll be humming along or we'll be singing along with have you ever done this? You sing along with a song and then you actually say the words out loud and you go, wow, I didn't know it actually said that. You're putting things into your brain, and music is a very powerful teaching aid. If you want to learn a language, the easiest way to learn a language is to sing songs in that language. You will remember everything, and your brain is getting it whether you realize it or not. I used to use the excuse back in the 80s, I don't really listen to the lyrics. Now, your brain hears the lyrics. You will be affected by that to some degree. Now, how you're going to cipher that out, how are you going to work that in your life and maintain, does that mean that you can only listen to classical music the rest of your life? I'm not saying that, but I am telling you, you need to be very careful because you are not immune to the problems that we face. When he says that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, he's talking in the context of people who are teaching that there is no resurrection of the dead. And he said, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. So what he's telling them is that even though you may not believe their philosophy or their teaching about the resurrection, that doesn't mean that you're not to be affected by it. And what happens is our brains take in information, and the things that we seem to accept, it starts to believe, and the things that we believe is what we act upon. So in this case, in 1 Corinthians 15, if you don't believe that there's a resurrection of the dead, if you just stand up and say, there's not a resurrection, what does that tell you? What does that tell your brain that it's okay to do? Anything you want, because your morals go out the window. You have nothing to live for or die for. There's nothing really worthwhile. So just live it up. There's no punishment at the end. What does that mean? Eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And you may never say those words, but you may tend to live that way if you're not careful in certain situations. It makes sin more palatable. Now, if you would look over in the book of Proverbs, we'll look at a couple of Proverbs because there's so much here for us in this principle. Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 23. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. Guard your hearts. Don't let things in there. You're not immune to it. Look in Matthew chapter 12. And Jesus talked about this in different contexts, but several times. Starting in verse 34, it says, brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Now notice what he says here. It's the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Our brains, we are capable of doing things that, I'm in trouble. We are capable of doing things that are important to us. We're capable of doing things and putting things into our head. We're capable of being around people that are bad influences and still be able to be okay. We are capable of doing that, and I recognize that. So when he talks about that in 1 Corinthians 15:33, that bad company corrupts good morals, it doesn't mean that it's immediate. I want to be clear that we can't dismiss everything that's evil and never be around it, because then we'd have to be hermits somewhere, and we can't do that. We have to be in the world, but not of the world. So this is a balance that we've got to figure out, right? When he says this in Matthew chapter 12, he's talking about the abundance of the heart. What is it? A lot of the abundance that comes in your heart. How do you know what the abundance is? When he says that, look in verse 34, where he says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Now, I had a problem now and then in high school. And my mom probably doesn't know that. She might have heard some things from me. I used to have a bad mouth. I used to say things that were wrong. And it got to be a habit. That was one of the hardest things to change, because it was reaction. But I started realizing the things that came out of my mouth were because they were in my heart. I had an abundance of it in my heart. So what I started to do was to clean up my heart, right? How do you do that? You clean up the way you think, you stop thinking that way, and you stop letting people influence you. You stop letting people be around you with that kind of language, right? That's what you do. So he says it's from the abundance of the heart. And you think, well, why do I do the things that I do? This is one of those questions that people ask. Sometimes they're going through like, drug rehab or something. They just very confused. Why do I do this to myself? And they really don't know. And the answer is because it's what's in their heart. They have to change what's there before they'll ever have any differences. So in verse 35, he says, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil things. What you treasure will be what comes out of your mouth. It comes out of your body. What you treasure is what you're going to do. And then in verse 37, he says, by your words you'll be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Now that's a very important idea. We will be judged by our words, not because of the words that are being said, but because of what those words represent. That's our heart. That's what we treasure inside. And so if we begin to change the things that we treasure, then that will be a step toward fixing the problems that we face. All right, the second one is that we set the tone. And what I mean here is we set the tone of behavior of people who are around us to a certain extent. We'll never be at a point where we can control what people do around us, but we can have an influence on that. I remember being around people who are not Christians, who in conversation with me, they were using all kinds of profanities. And then they learned I was a preacher. And they immediately cleaned up their language. I didn't say anything. I didn't like listening to the words, but it's not like I'm going around going, I can't believe you talk like that. I don't say that to people. I allow people to be themselves around me, especially if they're not Christians. I'm not judgmental. But some people, when they hear that I'm a preacher, they immediately go, oh, he doesn't want that around. And I appreciate that. I like that. Not because they're putting me on a pedestal. I wish they were that way around everyone that's a Christian. And you'll find people that way if you will simply tell them, I don't really like that in some way. You don't even have to use those words. Let them know you don't like that language. Most people are accommodating. It could be the behavior that you're around. You let people know what you will accept. You do that by the way you say things and by the way you react to the things that are done. So we honestly, in relationships, to a great degree, we train people how to treat us. And we can also have a habit, or we can have an influence on training them to stop treating us the way they treat us as well. And it doesn't mean it's always going to work, but it is something we can do. Proverbs chapter 24 and 25, he says, he who says to the wicked, you're righteous, him the people will curse, nations will abhor him. But those who rebuke the wicked will have delights, and a good blessing will come upon them. And this is the idea of rebuke. And the sense here is that we can say something, we can help people see how they should treat us and how we want to be treated. Proverbs chapter 28, verse 23. It says, he who rebukes a man will find more favor afterward than he who flatters with the tongue. It doesn't, flattery will get you everywhere, not in the end, right? Just tell people, talk to people, let them know, be assertive. That doesn't mean that you need to be mean or rude or judgmental or anything like that. It just means say something about it. If people are behaving in a way that's not appropriate, say something to them about it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. What would be wrong would be our attitude or the way that we do it. We can do it wrongly, but we certainly need to do it in some ways. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2, this is specifically to preachers. He said, preach the word, be instant, in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they'll have itching ears, boost up for themselves teachers. So he's telling Timothy to be careful to make sure he preaches the word, preaches it plainly, and he says to reprove, rebuke, and exhort. And those three words mean basically together, they're very similar words, but if you look at them together and you think, okay, what are the differences there? Reproving something means to actually show them what is wrong, to tell them this is what wrong is. To rebuke means to say, you are doing this thing that is wrong. And to reprove, rebuke, and exhort means to beg them and plead with them to stop doing that thing that is wrong and do what is right. So those three things are important there. And it shows us that we can set the tone. We can show people what is wrong. Why is it wrong for them to use language like that? It may not be comfortable for people to be spoken to that way or encouraged to change. In fact, most likely you may even offend them from time to time. So be careful in how you do that. I remember I was playing a game a long time ago online, and there were some people that started joining into my group, and I said, hey, there's a couple rules in here, and one of them is no foul language. And if you know online gaming, that's common, very, very common for language to be really bad. I mean, it's nothing. And so I said, group rule, I don't want bad language in here. And they said, what in the world does that mean? And they knew what it meant. It was like, how are you going to create a group and say no bad language? I said, that's just a rule I have. And you know what they said? Well, it's ridiculous, but we'll do it. That's what they said. It's ridiculous, but we'll do it. And they did. What if I never had said anything to them at all about it? They would have had the bad language. So just point it out. We don't have to be rude, but just point it out. I don't really like that. There's things that people don't like that you do. And if they tell you to stop, you stop. If people are doing things to you don't like, you tell them they should stop. If they're decent people, they will. All right. Number 3 is that the goal is purity. All right. New project. I have no idea why it's doing that. Purity is the goal. All right. I'm afraid to touch it now. Purity is the goal. It's not self-righteousness. It's not self-righteousness, it's holiness that we're looking for, right? Holiness is a decision to pursue holiness. That's to pursue purity. That's all it is. And it's not about perfection. It's about being faithful. None of us are perfect, and we certainly don't want to walk around acting like we are. Okay, so when we're talking to people about how they treat us or what they do around us that we don't like, we definitely don't want to leave the impression that we think we're perfect. We have it all together. We don't. You might even say that. Listen, I struggle with things too, but this really bothers me. I've even approached people this way. I tell them, I used to have a really bad habit with the words that I used. I'm trying to change this, trying to clean my mouth up. Would you please just not use that language around me? And you know what? That had helped a lot. They understood then why I was doing it. It wasn't because I was looking down on anyone. It's because I was trying to help myself. People appreciate that. Look in 1 Peter chapter 1. And here, really, most of this book is about purity, about holiness. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 through 19. In fact, I think the whole book is about this, the whole letter. 13 through 19 says, therefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts, as in your ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you are not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. So we were redeemed by someone who was perfect. And we are called to be holy as God is holy. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8 says, well, I forgot what it said. Let me go over there to it. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8, of course, in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay? So purity and holiness go hand in hand, especially when we're talking about Christianity. Purity is about the quality of our lives, that we have a pure heart, that our intentions are pure, our intentions are honorable, they're what they should be, and also that we're living our lives in a way that we're morally pure. Those are all things that relate to the quality of the life that we live. And holiness is about purpose. Holiness means that we're set aside for a specific thing. So my purpose of being set aside is that I will glorify God by the way I live my life. And that living my life in a way that glorifies God is living a life of purity, because that's who he is and that's what he wants from us. And he is teaching us, training us to be more and more pure, to be more and more holy. He has cleansed us from our sins, and this causes us, it spurs us on to try to improve in our areas of life. So we're not taking the sacrifice of Jesus for granted. We're doing everything that we can to improve ourselves. And as we grow and learn to be better humans, then God receives more and more glory because we start to see a difference. I remember reading in many places, in many contexts, in many time periods about Christians. And one of the things that you read about is that they stand out as different. I remember reading ancient Roman historians say that. They stand out as different because one of them said, just consider the women, the Christian women. They stand head and shoulders above all the other women in society because of the purity, because of their hearts. And this is what they teach. And one of them said they come together on Sunday morning before sunrise. This is with common practice. And they sing songs to Jesus and they praise God for their blessings. And they encourage each other to go out and do good in the community around them. This is what they live for. And people noticed. People notice when we're different. And God receives glory. That's what it's about. So purity is the goal. That's why this sermon is so important. And that's why if you look back over your life, you might see periods of time where you have been not as strong as you would like to have been, or maybe even fell away. If you'll analyze the reasons for that, one of the reasons could be because you started enjoying the wrong things. Your life started treasuring, your heart started treasuring the wrong things. What you treasure is so important. It will always determine your future. So if you treasure money and finances, you're going to pursue that with everything you have. If your treasure is in heaven, you're going to pursue the things of heaven. That doesn't mean that you're never going to have money. It doesn't mean that you can't have money. It just means that that's not what you're looking for, right? Solomon, in all of his great wisdom, his pursuit was not money, but he was given all of it. You remember when he was a child and God appeared to him and said, ask me for whatever you want. And he said, I just want to have the wisdom to be able to lead your people well. And God said, because you have asked for that, I'm not only going to give you that, but I'm going to give you wealth as well. And he gave him great treasures. In fact, he was so rich that it says silver was so common that it was like a rock. It was almost valueless in Israel because it was so common. That's how wealthy that he was. And it influenced other people. But it wasn't about wealth. Now, he definitely had some ups and downs in life. And toward the end, I like to think that Ecclesiastes was written from a perspective of an old man who looked back over his life and realized those pursuits were ridiculous and worthless. And now he understands the only thing that really is important, as he says in the last two verses of that book, is to love God and fear God and keep his commandments. That's the whole duty of man. That's what life is about. So this is what we need to take to heart. And we need to recognize that purity is not something that we play around with. It's not something that we take for granted. It should be something that we guard, because it's not just for us that we're guarding it. We are affecting, when our purity is affected, we're affecting the influence that we have on other people around us, and we're affecting the praise that God would receive because of the life that we live. So we want to protect that at all costs. It should be something that's a treasure to us. Our relationship with God should be more important than anything else. And I hope that this morning has been an encouragement to you to think about some of the things that we do, some of the things that you enjoy. Sit down sometime if you have the courage and think about the things that you enjoy doing. And it may be that there's nothing wrong with any of it, but I want to challenge you to see if any of the things that you enjoy are spiritual. Because we can enjoy a lot of things in this world that are not wrong, but they can get in the way of something that's actually more important. So while we want to make sure we're not treasuring evil, we also want to make sure that the things that we actually do treasure are appropriate and proportionate to what we actually see as important in life. If we think about it, sometimes our brains tell us a priority list and our hearts tell us a different one. We need to have those the same. Let your brain tell your heart what is most important. If there's anything that we can do for you this morning, we're here for you. If you want to be baptized for the remission of your sins so you can start this walk with Jesus, we're here for you. We want to help you with that. If you are a Christian and you haven't been living right, it's time to make some changes. If we can help you do that, please let us know. Please, won't you come as we stand and sing.